show at outlook.com. What on earth is going on at the Cleveland Clinic? This is unbelievable. There is a media blitz, a campaign titled Cleveland Clinic Exposed. And it poses a question, is a Cleveland Clinic the wokest hospital in America? Well, here to answer that question is the Executive Director of Consumers Research, Will Hild. Will, how are you doing, sir?
Doing great. Good to be with you.
Listen, I've got my sister-in-law is going to the Cleveland Clinic this week. I've been there with my dad, my sister, my wife has been there. And a lot of us in this region of Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky, we count on the Cleveland Clinic. You know, when our local hospital can't do what we need them to do, we end up making that long drive. It's like 4.5 hours for us to the Cleveland Clinic to hopefully get the proper diagnosis and proper care. But I didn't realize they'd gone woke.
Well, yeah, and that's what we think people should be able to rely on Cleveland Clinic for, right? That's why they exist. And really why we launched this campaign, because as we've seen with so many great businesses, so many organizations over the last 10 or so years, they've sort of been taken over by this woke mind virus. And instead of focusing on their main line of business, on serving their consumers, or in this case, their patients, they focus on these other things. And that's something even the CEO admitted to, that they consider providing healthcare only part of their mission. We think it ought to be all of their mission, especially when the other things that they're focusing on is this woke nonsense.
Yeah. So give us some examples here of what they're doing where they're prioritizing race-based care. Is that right?
That's right. It really hit the trifecta of wokeness here at the Cleveland Clinic. And, you know, after the BLM riots of 2020, we saw a rush for a lot of organizations to start engaging in some pretty obvious discrimination, anti-white, anti-Asian, and occasionally anti-Jewish discrimination by creating programs that were exclusively for certain groups. And that's basically what happened at Cleveland Clinic. They started something called the Minority Stroke Program and the Minority Men's Health Program, which was specifically to serve people based on their skin color. Now, this was reported to HHS's Office of Civil Rights, who opened an investigation. Shortly after that, they basically deleted all of the stuff on this website because they realized, I'm sure somebody in the legal compliance department finally took a look at it and they realized what had been done. But they also, in December of 2020, pledged to help create 1 million black jobs, or jobs for black people specifically, which is a race-based hiring quota. It's not legal under our federal labor laws, probably not under state Ohio laws, and they've yet to repudiate that. So it's really both in terms of the way they treat their own staff and discriminating based on skin color there, based on the pledges they've made, and then creating programs specifically for patient population based on the color of their skin or their ethnicity. They're sort of, involving DEI in both sides of the equation, which is really unfortunate.
I guarantee you, when my brother takes his wife to the Cleveland Clinic this week for multiple concerns, that they are counting on the fact that the Cleveland Clinic would have the best, most qualified physicians and caregivers that there are, not based upon the color of their skin or ethnicity or LGBT activism or anything like that, but based on, who has the most ability, the most proven capabilities. And if that's not the case, then that's a wasted trip.
100%. And unfortunately, Cleveland Clinic, the wokeness doesn't end there. They've also been engaging in these very aggressive net zero pledges where the hospital says they're going to be net carbon emissions neutral by 2027, which is the most aggressive pledge I've ever seen. I mean, the most woke companies I've ever targeted with other campaigns have not set an aggressive pledge. And I'm sure some of your listeners may think, well, what's the big deal? Why is that? Who cares? I mean, if they want to become more environmental friendly, according to them, even if I might think it's nonsense. Here's the problem with that. There is no way to run a hospital net zero. When you think of the thousands of products and chemicals that you need to run a hospital that are made using petroleum products that require carbon emissions, even just the electrical output or input that a hospital needs, there's no way to do that net zero in any kind of real technical sense. what they mean by that, when you see these organizations set these aggressive pledges that are not, technically or scientifically feasible, what they're saying is we are going to go out and we are going to spend money buying what they call carbon offsets, meaning that we're going to continue to emit carbon, but we're going to go spend money, almost like indulgences in the Catholic Church that led to the Protestant Reformation. We're going to pay money to sort of exculpate our sins, right? And the issue with that is one of two things has to happen when you've paid lots of money for that. You either have to pass those costs on to the consumer in the form of either higher reimbursement costs from insurers, which leads to higher premiums, or direct costs to consumers in form of higher copays. Or you have to reduce investments that you'd want Cleveland Clinic to be making in either, capital expenditures, investments, research. I mean, our government spends tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars giving money to Cleveland Clinic to do research. And part of that is to pay for overhead. Do we really want that money going to spend these carbon offset credits, this complete grift, this nonsense? Or do we want that money going to research? It's really our taxpayer dollars that are funding this kind of nonsense. So it's not just that, hey, who cares if they want to do a bunch of dumb stuff? It doesn't affect me. It affects us as consumers. It affects us as patients. It affects us as taxpayers. And so it really, when we see these, we like to highlight for consumers how they're being mistreated by this woke virtue signaling by the executives.
Yeah. I tell you what, it doesn't affect. It doesn't affect the climate at all. Not one iota what they're trying to do. It's what Rush Limbaugh used to determine as symbolism over substance. There is no substance to it. It doesn't do any good for the planet. It's just so they can pat themselves on the back and say, hey, look at us. We're woke. If they really want to be serious about saving the planet, then I tell you what, let's make sure that all electricity at Cleveland Clinic is powered by solar. And I don't know if you've been to Cleveland lately, but the sun doesn't always shine there. So let's just see how they do and how long they last, especially during the winter.
That's exactly right. And just to get a little bit of the nitty-gritty, I don't know that the Cleveland Clinic is doing this specific thing, but one of the real grifts that we see with these net zero pledges is they'll say that even their electricity is come from renewable sources. There is no way to buy a specific type of electricity from the grid. You can't, even if a state has a public utility has a grid that is made up by wind, solar, but also coal and natural gas and nuclear, you can't put it in order for just the solar powered electricity or just the wind. It all goes into the same mix. So we've seen this with a lot of big tech firms that have pledged to be net zero and only use renewable energy. They pay a fee to the public utility for them to just be able to say that. In other words, they pay the utility to say, tell people that I'm just buying the renewable, quote unquote. It's not renewable, but that's a whole nother conversation. Just the wind and solar. That's what I'm buying. And of course, that's nonsense. That's not technically feasible. That's not the way electricity works. But they pay a fee. It's like an indulgence. It's like what was going on in the Catholic Church that led to the Reformation. So there's no way to run a hospital without electricity. So there's no way by 2027, unless that public utility in Ohio is net zero, there's no way for the hospital to meet net zero. It's a lie. It's just woke virtue signaling. But the costs are passed along to the patients and the taxpayer.
Will, do the folks at Cleveland Clinic not realize it's no longer 2024, it's 2025, and Joe Biden, Kamala Harris are not in the White House. President Donald Trump is, and he signed an executive order to end this DEI crap. Wouldn't it be better for them if they kind of got on board instead of staying in the past?
Yeah, it's one of the really things that's really frustrating when you see these organizations is that even if they felt that they were being forced to do this because of contracting requirements from the Biden administration or from the Department of Energy or for the HHS, if they were getting pressure for that, now is the time to come out and say that and say we were being improperly, if not illegally pressured to do things that were not in the interest of our patients. We were pressured through HHS grants. We were pressured through DOJ, whatever it was, EEOC, whatever it was. Now is the time to be putting that onus on the Biden administration, if that's the case. If not, then what are people supposed to believe? I mean, they see what's going on in the executive C-suites of Cleveland Clinic, and they'll just assume that they wanted this. So that's one thing. If they want to flip, if they want to say, we didn't really want to do this, we were pressured into it, now is the perfect time. And our campaign will end the moment they repudiate all these woke nonsense they've been doing and get back to patient care. Our point is not to hold a grudge or to be punitive or vengeful. Our point is to get the Cleveland Clinic and every organization in America back on what it's supposed to be doing, not serving these woke activists and the woke politicians, which you rightly point out aren't in office anymore. So why are you doing it?
Yeah. They proudly promote that they're a 2024 LGBTQ plus healthcare equality leader. I mean, they've got their own little badge to put on their websites about that. And by the way, this doesn't just affect Ohio. That's where their main campus is in Cleveland, Ohio. And that's where most of us in this region would go. But they have campuses outside of Ohio.
They do. I mean, Cleveland Clinic is a worldwide institution. They have offices in Dubai. If you look at their board of trustees, I think they have two high up in the Saudi world. I don't understand all the royalty hierarchy over there, but it looks like they've got two Saudi sheiks involved in that because of their international acclaim. And so they push this stuff all over the place. There's even places that don't have the Cleveland Clinic brand that are part of the complex. There's one in West Virginia, for example, that we've been looking into for what they've been doing. And what's really alarming, you mentioned the LGBTQ issues, is one of the things that we found in our research. There's an organization called Do No Harm that looks at sex change operations and treatments for that are being applied to underage people who can't give full consent. And Cleveland Clinic is one of the people who've been engaging in this. This is something they've denied, which I find fairly incredible, because where Do No Harm gets their information is they go on in the public markets. You can buy anonymized insurance reimbursement request information. So in other words, you can see every claim that a health provider has put in to either Medicare, Medicaid, or the private insurers to get reimbursed for procedures. And it also includes some demographic data. To be clear, it doesn't include anybody's names. This isn't an issue of patient population being released. But in terms of basic demographic data, race, sex, and age, most importantly, it includes that. And Do No Harm has about 110 instances of where, for patients under the age of 17 and a half, because that's the nomenclature that the data uses, these types of procedures, these sex change procedures, were applied or done to minors. And they're denying that. I don't know where I don't know how they do that, because they either applied sex change operations to minors or they committed insurance fraud. It's not a good look either way. Mm. So, it's really unfortunate, because this is a disgusting practice. The idea, it's been banned in Ohio, thankfully. I hope they're not doing it today, or they're breaking the law. And maybe that's what they mean by they don't do it. They mean they don't do it today because it's illegal now. But they need to come clean on what happened. Unfortunately, the medical industry does have a somewhat checkered history. There have been many things like from lobotomies to Tuskegee experiments. But the most important thing is to again come clean and say, yeah, this was unfortunate. This violated ethics, obvious morality. But we don't do that anymore. But instead, they're doubling down. They're calling me a liar. They had their lawyer, who actually turned out to be my lawyer, send a cease and desist to us and try to threaten us. We're not going to back down. We know the facts. We have the data. But they need to come clean about this and make sure that they've put an end to it. And then make sure that everyone knows that it's not going on to this day. Because when you deny something that you did, it makes people think, what else would you lie about? Yeah.
You say their lawyer became your lawyer. What do you mean by that?
Their lawyer turned out to be my lawyer. In other words, we used a firm called Jones Day to do a number of different things. We continue, as of right now, we continue to use them on a number of different matters, but they represented me all the way up to the Supreme Court. And Jones Day happens to have an office in Ohio. In fact, I think their headquarters is there. And it was a Jones Day attorney that sent me a cease and desist and threatened to sue me, which of course is a violation of legal ethics. You can't threaten to sue your own client except under very specific circumstances. So as an interesting wrinkle, clearly, it would appear, let me put it that way, I don't want to defame them after they've defamed me. It would appear that somebody forgot to do a conflicts check before they wrote the letter.
Yeah. The left hand ought to check with the right hand occasionally.
Exactly.
Will, it's perplexing to me. My dad was a World War II hero, died a few years ago, but in his final days, He went to the Cleveland Clinic many times, and really they had saved his life with a hip surgery. The local hospital had botched it up, and my sister was able to make a call where he'd been a patient at Cleveland Clinic previously, and he got rushed on New Year's Day to the Cleveland Clinic, and they did an emergency hip replacement surgery and got him back on the right track after the local hospital in West Virginia just totally screwed him up. So, we've been very thankful for, the doctors that we've dealt with at Cleveland Clinic. And it's just so hard to understand that the same facility that has saved lives and done incredible things for so many people from our region, that they're also cutting the healthy breast off of teenage girls. It's mind-boggling. Why would they be doing that? Why would they be involved in that? If indeed they are, at least they're getting paid for it.
Yeah, exactly. They're getting paid for it. Well, I think it warrants an investigation as to whether it occurred. My base case is that it did. It's unlikely that they committed insurance fraud, but one of those two things has to be true, because they put in the reimbursement request for the procedures. And yeah, you're right. And we see that across the spectrum. And let me make something clear. All this wokeness it's cancerous. This is a perfect medical analogy. It's cancerous, both in the pejorative sense, meaning we call it cancer because it's bad, right? We say, oh, this is cancerous because it's a bad thing, but also in the technical sense, because when you think about cancer cells, right, they don't serve a purpose. They don't help your body in any way. They exist for themselves, and they exist for one purpose, and that is to grow and to take dominion more and more over the host that they live within until they kill it. Really. And that's what wokeness really is. I mean, you see these DEI departments. These DEI departments don't help these companies serve their bottom line. They don't help them serve their customers better. They do nothing except try to grow their own size and dominion over the company. And they've killed a number of businesses that we've seen, and they continue to harm a number of others. They're cancerous. They're cancerous in the technical sense of the term, and they need to be chiseled out, just like Cleveland Clinic, I'm sure probably hundreds of times a day, removes cancerous tumors and cells from people's bodies and treats that. We need to treat the woke cancer within these organizations, including Cleveland Clinic, and remove that, so that they can get back to exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, which is the medical miracles that keep people alive every day. That's what they need to be focusing on. And no, I'm not suggesting we demolish all of the great things that Cleveland Clinic does. The point is to remove the woke cancer so that the Cleveland Clinic host, can continue to do what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I have a cancerous lesion on my back, they can simply remove that, but my hands and feet are still usable, and so that's the way it is. There's good doctors and good programs at the Cleveland Clinic, but the cancer does need to be cut out. I agree with you there. Will Hild, Executive Director, Consumers Research, talking about the wokeness at Cleveland Clinic. Learn more at consumersresearch.org. The Tom Roden Show is driven by Martin Transport, now hiring Class A CDL truck drivers for their Canova, West Virginia terminal. See Lance Schultz and apply online at martintransport.com. That's martintransport.com. Will, I noticed on consumersresearch.org that you have a report here about a Cleveland Clinic doctor, or they knew that a doctor was accused of raping two patients, but yet kept that doctor on staff. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a pretty egregious situation where he exposed himself to a number of patients allegedly, and yet nothing was done. And what else is there to say to that, except if you're not, when you're not focusing on the things you should be focusing on, when you're focusing on these other distractions, you can end up making some pretty significant, mistakes. And every patient should know that when they go into the Cleveland Clinic, they're perfectly safe from that kind of incredible behavior.
Unbelievable. ClevelandClinicExposed.com. That's the website you guys have formed where people can learn more about the wokeness, and you tell folks at Cleveland Clinic to stop injecting woke politics into patient care.
That's exactly right. That's really what we're calling for them to do, is simply just to get rid of this wokeness, focus back on patient care, to take the CEO's own words, stop making healthcare only part of your mission, go back to making it all of your mission, because that's really what the Cleveland Clinic exists to do. And it's not up to the executives to change that. They need to be, that's why the Cleveland Clinic was established. They need to be true to that mission.
Yeah. So clevelandclinicexposed.com is where folks can learn more about this. But you're doing more than the website. You're actually you've got billboards running in Columbus and different places trying to inform folks.
Yeah, that's right. And we actually were supposed to run an ad during the Cavs game last week. The owner himself, actually, according to our ad network, who's on the board of Cleveland Clinic, stepped in to prevent those ads from running. So we're working on other ways to get the TV ads out there. But it was a very interesting development that someone, billionaire, weighed in to prevent the news from getting out.
Wow. So in an effort to stop free speech and free advertisement, they stopped your campaign. That's unbelievable.
It would appear so. That's according to, just to be clear, that's according to the network that we placed the ads with, who had ended up not running them when we asked for an explanation. They said that there was pressure coming all the way from the top, including the owner, who stepped in and said that they would not be running the ad. So, again, it gets, they ran, I think during that same game, they ran 3 ads for the Cleveland Clinic, but they wouldn't let a message exposing the Cleveland Clinic run. It's just billionaire censorship. But don't worry about it. This is not an uncommon practice for us. We've run ads against some of the biggest players in the world. We've run millions of dollars ads against BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world. We'll figure out a way to get the word out. And we appreciate your attention to this important matter too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is this something that Elon Musk and Doge could dive into? I mean, not just Cleveland Clinic, but all these hospitals. They're almost sacred cows. I mean, you can't touch them. They do so much good for the region. But they're also taking taxpayer dollars in some cases. Maybe they need to be looked into.
You're 100% right. You're 1,000% right. This is exactly the kind of thing that the HHS, Office of Civil Rights, should be looking into. The Inspector General should be looking into. Even the DOJ Civil Division probably should look into this and make sure that everything. Because, like I said, Cleveland Clinic receives hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer grants. If you go on to the publicly available databases and just search Cleveland Clinic for how much federal dollars they get, it's a huge sums for research. And I'm sure much of that research is good, but all of that research money is taken to provide overhead for Cleveland Clinic. And so that means that if the executives are pushing all this woke nonsense, the DEI, the sex change for minors, the racial discrimination in hiring, that taxpayer money is going to that, and they have a right to investigate that. And so absolutely, I do think they should look into it. And I mean, if you'd have asked me 3 months ago, what does USAID do? I would say, they provide, bags of rice for people in Africa that are going through a famine or something like that. And then once Doge got in there and cracked open, the Pandora's box of everything we were paying for him, it was just utter insanity. The level of, some of this stuff was basically borderline running color revolutions on some of the governments that we were operating in, which of course creates all kinds of diplomatic issues for the United States. We seem to be meddling in the governments of these other countries. And it was sort of a world unto itself. I mean, USAID basically didn't have any oversight. It was running its own, private diplomatic corps using this money. So I absolutely think that the HHS and, once Doge gets to the DOJ and the HHS, they should look into this and whether make sure that these funding dollars are not being used to push wokeness.
Well, I don't understand what you got against spending $10 million on transgender rats, mice, and monkeys. I mean, what is it with you?
Yeah, call me a curmudgeon, but I just think the average taxpayer doesn't need to be spending his money on that.
Yeah. Hey, and I know this kind of delves into another topic, but, in talking about the millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money that goes to places like Cleveland Clinic, what would happen to our healthcare system if all government funding just ended and hospitals had to survive on their own in the free market, providing the best quality service, the best products, the best care at the lowest possible prices just to compete with the next hospital?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, we have such a tangled mess of regulations and subsidies and taxes, and even a lot of it even goes back to the IRS just deciding that health insurance wasn't a taxable benefit. So we're sort of the only country in the world that tends to get our health insurance through our employer, which, think about that in any other context. Would you imagine if you got your car insurance through your employer? That's sort of a bizarre concept, and yet we have it in healthcare. And my understanding is a lot of the corporations like it that way because it keeps people on the hook. It's a way in which people don't want to lose their jobs. They're more they're less likely to look for competing offers, basically. But also with what you mentioned with the research subsidies and that kind of thing, I'm sure, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there have been breakthroughs and things that have happened because of government investments in research. But, like we saw with USAID, there's probably a couple of raisins, but it's mixed in with a whole bunch of turds. And so I think it's good that we go through and start really looking at these investments and making sure that they're being used for the kind of research that we want, and not these boondoggle projects, and certainly not to push these companies, these businesses, and these hospitals into a woke direction. Because even if the underlying research is good, let's say you're going to spend $10 million and it's going to yield some sort of new breakthrough in cancer treatment, if the restrictions you've been putting on those contracts, on those grants, requires all kinds of insane nonsense. And this is what the Biden administration was known for doing, putting in kind of DEI race and sex-based quotas, which are illegal, putting in requirements that they special carve-outs for the LGBTQ community, supposedly, right? All the net zero requirements, all the stuff that we see coming out of the Cleveland Clinic. Even if the underlying grant is good, if you're putting those restrictions on, that is deleterious to the quality of care at Cleveland Clinic, and it undoes a lot of the effects of the research, because it won't matter. The hospital will turn into a political utility, not a place where people can get top flight care.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you were putting some billboards out around the State House in Ohio, in Columbus. So are you hoping that lawmakers will get involved in some way?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been talking a lot about federal investigations and oversight here, but Cleveland Clinic is based in the state of Ohio. Ohio has jurisdiction over the Cleveland Clinic, and they passed a law saying that sex changes on minors are illegal now. So, looking at the data, it would appear that Cleveland Clinic was doing this in the past and now is denying it. So it would seem to me that if they're lying about that, that's something that they should be looked into so people can understand and make sure that they're fully complying with the law today. So I absolutely believe, and that's not to say anything about the discrimination within amongst patients and among hiring and promotion that the Cleveland Clinic has committed to doing when they made that commitment to hire a certain amount of Black people as part of this 1 million Black jobs commitment that they made back in 2020, which they haven't repudiated. So I absolutely believe there is room for the Attorney General Yost to look into this. There's room for the governor's office to look into it, and there's absolutely room for the legislature to make sure that Ohio tax dollars, should they be going to Ohio, a Cleveland Clinic, are being used for what they're supposed to be, and not this woke nonsense.
There's a woke alert out on the Cleveland Clinic, and I hope folks will look more into this. You can go to consumersresearch.org. Now, Will, before we let you go, tell us, what is Consumers Research? I know you've been around since 1929.
That's right. We're the nation's oldest consumer protection organization. We have a nearly 100-year pedigree of educating consumers on issues important to them and also amplifying their voice in the marketplace, which is what we're doing now. I came on about 5 years ago with the idea of focusing the organization to push back against this woke nonsense that's directing attention of organizations like Cleveland Clinic away from serving their consumers and on to serving woke politicians. And so our message is very simple, both to the Cleveland Clinic, but also to all of corporate America, is focus on your customers, not on woke politicians and activists. And that's what we do every day.
Good deal. And you do a good job with it, too. Will Hild, Executive Director, Consumers Research. Thank you so much for informing us of this, about the Cleveland Clinic and the work that you do.
Thanks so much for having me on. It was great.